Well, welcome to this episode of UMBC's Mic'd Up podcast. My name is Denise Cardona from the Office of Professional Programs. We are joined by a recent graduate of our Engineering Management Graduate Program, Troy Venuto. We hope that you enjoy this episode. Troy, welcome to UMBC's Mic'd Up podcast. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of your professional endeavors and educational journey toward UMBC?
I'll try not to take up your whole podcast with this. So I graduated from the University of Maryland in College Park, mechanical engineering in December of 2004. Most of my engineering experience has been in heavy research and development, fast-paced prototyping, really quick design turns, low quantities, never meant for any sort of production, government contracting, for defense and automation, materials handling, such like that. However, I did start a fitness business in 2008, and I worked that full time from 2012 to 2016. So I was away from engineering for that time, running my business. And then in 2016, I came back and kind of picked up where I left off with government contracting and automation. So I guess it didn't take too long, but it feels like a winding path for me.
Yeah, I would imagine you're going from the engineering world to the fitness world and then back to the engineering world again. That is quite I don't know, I wouldn't call it a circular, more of like a zigzag type of pathway, which is really cool because it opens you up to new experiences, new ways of viewing things. In terms of why you chose to go back to graduate school, was it primarily to kind of like revamp some of your skill sets and things of that sort to help you enter the workforce again in the engineering world, or was it more of a curious mindset?
So I think it's I think you've nailed the curious mindset. I tend to always have a project going on. The fitness business was a project that kind of grew into more. I came back into engineering first before coming to the graduate program. But, when you run your own business, you're kind of the manager by default, and it's a little bit of a trial by fire. No one tells you if you do anything wrong. You have feedback from how well things are working, but as I said, it's a trial by fire. And I had the benefit of having some good mentors in that business. But I think I benefited heavily most by frameworks, right? Frameworks on how to think about training or how to think about the business itself, or what it is I was really doing in business. And so, as I returned to engineering and looked to kind of move into more of a leadership role in this world, I think I needed those frameworks and, not really having any immediate mentors in that way. I felt like I needed to kind of seek professional help. As I would tell my clients, perhaps if there was something I couldn't help them with, and that I didn't have that where I was. And so I needed to go out and acquire it. So that's what I found the engineering management program at UMBC.
Yeah. And, it's all about processes, right? Whether you're managing an organization of your own, whether you're managing engineering as a process, it really does come down to a process, a systems approach to the way that you run a team, a project, or a business.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, and you need the framework, even above that system to, what's it all hanging from, to really know what levers you need to pull or what's missing. Otherwise, it's really hard to tell.
That's a really good point that you made in terms of like an aerial view, in a way, like looking at it from a bird's eye view to be able to see there are so many different elements to what you're managing. Sometimes I become so invested in a specific project that I become siloed to it. And from a management perspective, it really requires you to step back and view it from a very different perspective, where you see all of the stakeholders who are involved in the process and what that actually means and what the team's actions actually mean to the vitality of the project at hand.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's one thing that kind of links engineering and fitness, which are very different, very different endeavors. But I think there's that kind of what you hinted at as a top-down and bottom-up approach, right? You need to look at it both with the magnifying glass as well as the telescope. You need to get into the nitty gritty and both out to the system, because if you stay in one zone for too long, you'll lose what's going on kind of holistically. And so I think that's a something that links the two. And I think I like synthesizing both in and out down from the tolerance level, if we're talking mechanical engineering, up to, philosophy of what the design's supposed to do, especially when you're in the industries that I've been in where, I'm given a whole design. I'm not, if I was an automotive engineer, I'd be given one little part, but, I'm given a big thing that does something. And, I go from the choice of the fastener up to, how I think the thing's going to work overall. So I think that the ability to, zoom in and out at the same time is extremely helpful.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me, the broad nature of engineering. It touches most every aspect of life, doesn't it? The fact that you were in the fitness industry, maybe still are, I'm not sure, but we're in the fitness industry and those skills are very transferable. Can you talk a little bit about the transferability of skill sets between what you were doing in terms of leading an organization of your own versus leading the purview of engineering management within an organization?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of transferability, like you mentioned. I think that, coming from engineering and moving to maybe a softer discipline like fitness, I think that it's kind of that systems mindset and the rigor. I think rigor, people used to joke, I was always correcting my coaches on very minor points, but it's very important to be rigorous and understand, the real science behind what you're doing, because, I talk about mechanical systems that I design here. I mean, a human body is a mechanical system, and there are things that it does and things that it doesn't do. And unfortunately, in much of the fitness industry, there's not so much rigor in a lot of what you might read. And so I think bringing that rigor to the table, and I think that was why I wanted to getting this degree, because I needed that rigor of speech. I needed to know, what was the correct way to describe a structure of, organization, or the way we might tabulate the finances of this project. I didn't have that rigorous way to speak about it. I had the rigorous way to speak about and think about, my mechanical designs, right, from my mechanical engineering degree and learnings after that degree, of course. I didn't have that rigorous way to speak about or even understand if a project wasn't going well or a workplace wasn't running smoothly. Really diagnose that problem. Once you get those frameworks, you can see what's missing. It makes it much easier. It makes it very glaring when you have the book. It's almost like a cheat sheet, right? You don't have to muddle through it. You have the engineering management body of knowledge. The MBOK is something we reference back to frequently because it has such a complete list of various frameworks. There's not even one, but if you have that framework to go back to, you can see where your holes are or how your process pretends to conform to but does not truly conform to it. And I think that all of engineering is trying a prototype and seeing how it works and tweaking, right? You're never going to get it perfectly right the first time, but if you have your good fundamentals, then you'll hopefully understand what's not working about it and where you need to move to. And so I think that is true of both, again, mechanical designs and organizations and projects. So you can see where something's not running well and you have the rigorous kind of framework to back it up. You can diagnose the nature of that problem and come up with a way to fix it.
Wow. Yeah, you put that so eloquently. You really did. It shows the passion that you have for engineering. And so I'm always interested to hear from people who are in a specific field. What do you love most about the field of engineering? What is it that gets you up out of bed in the morning and gets you into that office and says, I really can't wait to roll up my sleeves and do this work today?
Yeah, I think that, the sense that there is a solution to this thing, this problem that's out there. It's not impossible. We're not being asked to do anything impossible. There's a solution that's out there. There's not one, there's many. There's a good way to do it, an elegant way to do it. And I think always refining down to that, how's the best way to do this? That, the user is the most friendly to the user. I'm never or not often asked to make it the most cost efficient, but maybe if someone else is in an industry, or if I was in a different industry, it would be, how do you make it a little bit cheaper to make? And so I think that, knowing that people in some way are going to be interacting with these things, and that the better job I do, the better that's going to be, until it comes out of my brain and onto the paper and through a machine shop and through a paint shop and put together by somebody, it didn't exist. it's some of the same things that I liked about the fitness industry, helping people improve. Luckily, mechanical designs don't often fight you. They do what you say. So that's a little bit easier from that standpoint. But yeah, I think it's the creation of something novel and the knowing that there's a good way to do it. And that if you have the frameworks, it's merely just a way of, it's just a matter of paying attention to how things are going. And, there's always a solution. There's no real failures. There's just refining.
Oh, that's a powerful statement right there. The refining, no failures, just refining and finding those solutions. That's really a solutions-based approach it's just a powerful approach to anything in life, regardless if it's engineering, fitness, or just, relationships, anything that is a really great approach. Can you talk about what you're doing currently in your role?
Sure. So I work for a company called Teledyne FLIR. It came into being when Teledyne acquired FLIR Systems. I work in an integrations group of FLIR where we integrate sometimes our own sensors and sometimes subcontractor sensors onto oftentimes military vehicles or sometimes other unmanned vehicles. We also do a heavy unmanned and robotics system here. So I think, it's a lot of novel parts that have never been created before, novel things to, combine two systems together. I'm currently working the Army's NBCRV vehicle, which is the nuclear, biological, chemical reconnaissance vehicle. It's a vehicle that gives the Army better eyes and ears, and really better nose to sniff out, chemical and nuclear threats, so that they can keep the soldiers safe. And so again, going back to users, what better user to wake up and think about improving their lives every day than someone who's, trying to keep everyone safe. So that's the current role there.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing role. It has such purpose, and it would definitely be something to get out of bed in the morning and roll up the sleeves and do the work, because you're out there helping people who are helping the greater good of this country as well. So it's a beautiful cycle. You have, it sounds like, an incredible experience to be able to share with your peers in a classroom. And that is, to me, one of the most important elements of graduate school, is being able to learn from your fellow classmates and faculty, of course. And it's that rich experience, that dynamic experience of being able to share ideas from very different types of roles that we have out there in the world. Can you talk a little bit about what that peer engagement looked like in the classroom?
Well, I mean, as you might have guessed, it did change throughout my time at UMBC. Originally, I was in classes, and it moved really to remote for the rest of my my semesters. Many of the professors did a really, a Herculean effort, I guess you would say, to make sure to retain that peer-to-peer, communication with discussion boards. We were always encouraged to make a discussion post on the outside readings. And I think that was always very helpful. To be assigned a book and just read it on your own is one thing, but to be assigned a book and chapter by chapter have to, post a learning or something. And even if there's something that you don't agree with, you get to test your theory of why it's not correct or against other people who will critique it. And I think that that's just like a design review for a mechanical engineer. You had an idea of how this is going to go, and you're going to go into a room and present that and argue for it and have other people argue against it, not because they want to, discredit what you did, but because they're trying to poke holes in it. And if there's no holes, then you move forward with it. So I think that's just a great way to look at that, not necessarily adversarial, but the ability to have a safe space to challenge each other, and play with concepts, right? There's not one good way to do a mechanical design, and there's not one, perfect way to think about any of these engineering topics or management topics or financial topics or leadership topics or whatever. I mean, if you go into the MBOC, the body of knowledge, there are contradictory things within that. And it's, acknowledging that tension and, trying to find a way to wrap your head around how both ways could be useful in different scenarios. I think open-mindedness is what I'm getting at here, is not to assume there's only one good way to do anything. And I think that only by interaction with a lot of people can you really stress test those things. If you only had one or two people to bounce your mechanical design off of, it might work, but it's probably not going to be the best it could be. The more people you have with different backgrounds and different, experiences to show, then I think the better these things get over time. Because again, it's not, you can't be afraid to be wrong. You just got to test out your ideas, and both for, again, design work and just thought work, which is really it's nice. I'm a big fan of it. I'll stay in the thought realm for as long as anyone wants, and that's what it is when you're, doing classwork. It's all theoretical. It's not, your decisions you make are not actually going to change anything. For me, it was an interesting experience. I was going to class with people who, were born when I was in high school. So, it's
Yes.
interesting to get their perspective, and, they had a very different educational experience than I did, and I think that although mechanical engineering might be one of the older, more staid, maybe some people view it as static disciplines, not like software engineering or something that is constantly changing. I do think there's always things to learn, methodologies and tools that, weren't even discussed when I was going through my undergrad.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I had that conversation earlier with somebody about technology, and just the fact that when I was graduating from college, YouTube didn't even exist. So, the fact that I didn't even realize, I landed in this role at UMBC where I am with video all day long, and this wasn't even something I could conceive back then because it didn't exist. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
Imagine a student is not sure, they're maybe on the fence about, is this engineering management program at UMBC worth going to? Why should I? Is it necessary? What would you say to that person?
I don't think anything's ever necessary. I've worked with mechanical engineers that don't have a mechanical engineering degree. I think there's always many paths to what you want to do. I think I would look around and, what is lacking, right? I mean, if you are lacking technical mentors, then maybe you need a technical master's if you want to get into a specific technical area. But if you're lacking, mentorship in management, in organization, in leadership, I think that this is a great program for really staying in the engineering mindset, but also having that, softer, not in the pejorative term, but in the softer skill, in the way to think about things, interpersonally, leadership-wise, motivational-wise. Obviously, like I said, I got that trial by fire in the fitness industry, but even so, I felt like I needed to still brush up on the frameworks that we would use in engineering and in larger business settings, which is where you're going to find most of your work. And what I think was the most useful mix of like business and technical instruction, being a master's of science, I think it comes with that weight of, you did technical work as well. It's not an MBA. MBAs I think are useful for some, but as far as staying in that technical zone, you want to keep your hand in the technical, processes, then I think that this is a great route to go.
Yeah. So what was your biggest takeaway from the program?
Yeah, honestly, I think, coming back to academia after so long, the academia both leads and lags, current practice and thought in different ways. Thinking back to, my former roles, current roles, there's times when I could point to, like page 4 of the MBOK and say, hey, look, we're violating this, or we're not even, this role is missing here. We say we're a matrix organization, but you don't even have this whole, section here that's supposed to be there. And so I think in those cases, the program leads what many in industry are actually doing. So few of my managers have a engineering management degree. They just kind of moved up through being a technical person, good at their technical, and now they're put into this management role. They just don't have those frameworks. And so things are missing, not because it's malicious or because they don't feel like hiring someone or all the old, employee complaints. It's just literally they don't know these things should be there. And so I think in a lot of ways, engineering management is leading those things. A graduate of engineering management is going to, go into many businesses and be better informed than a lot of their superiors on, the right way to be doing this project or the right system of organization for the kind of work you do, be it, job shop or heavy production or whatever. The program is actually leading what's going on. Things are changing faster and faster, right? The rate of change keeps increasing just like the amount of change. It's not long before blockchain creeps into mechanical engineering and AI creeps into mechanical designs, just from a mechanical standpoint of things that could happen in the future. So it's critical to keep academia moving along, especially with a professional program that's already so focused on being useful, outside of the program itself. And I think, one of the big advertisements for the program was that only a few people actually work for the program. Most of the professors work in industry, right? They're out there. And I think that was hugely helpful. When COVID hit, I was taking a class, a manufacturing class with someone who manages manufacturing for Black & Decker, right? And so he's telling us in real time how they're responding to supply chain disruptions. And so, that sort of ability to learn those things real time and to know what's going on in the moment is hugely valuable. And one of the benefits of a professional program that's designed to not just be the end in and of itself. And so if that's the case, staying on the bleeding edge of everything, societal issues as well, I think is hugely valuable. And it's good to see when Dr. Winchester, he certainly has that in his crosshairs.
Indeed, he does. Absolutely.
It's funny, it's the end of a year. As we start to exit COVID, and in fitness, right, you always take some time to reevaluate your goals.
Yes.
You can't be doing everything. So, is the path you're on what you want to do? The Olympics is coming up here. I love watching it. It's just all the ways people decide to train and to what they can make themselves do.
Yeah.
And the only thing that was different about these people is they just decided to do one thing versus the only difference between the marathon runner and the thrower was one trained throwing for a long time and one trained, they might have had some natural advantages that indicated one or the other, but, it was that decision. And so, taking time to take stock and do a quick review, what did this whole thing mean? What was the most useful? What was the least useful? What are the little sticky notes I'm going to have to put on my monitor to every day look at and say, this is what you need to remember from this. This is what this program meant, or this is what this learning was. That's going to help you every day. What are the big takeaways from the year? I think that's a habit that comes out of fitness and sports and training people. Because as the coach, you're doing the same thing. Like,
absolutely.
What was the big learning from training this person for the past year and what they thought was good and bad? And what do I need to think about? Even if I don't even tell them what it is.
Yeah.
Even if they don't need to know, I need to know that. I need to keep that at top of mind. And so the opportunity to do this interview was good to force that, reckoning, or force that thought process. And what did it, what was the biggest takeaway?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're forced to kind of think those things through, it really does help to give you perspective and gives the experience breadth and depth. Just it brings that out. And now, like you said, you're charged. You feel more charged with sticky notes you can put all over your monitor.
Right. Because there's no one. This is not something where someone's suddenly beating down your door to hand you a big fat check for finishing. There's no,
I know
you can walk away and nobody cares, right? It's the learning that you take away and the increased efficacy you'll have, and maybe a little bit some justification for wanting to move forward or up or however you think about that. It's not just a piece of paper, never has been, of course, but that's the thing. It's if you didn't get a good takeaway or if you didn't have a lot of aha moments or really some refined goals of where you want to move to next, then it might have been a little bit wasted. So to be as effective as possible, I think this talk was helpful to have to hone those thoughts for good sound bites and for good, just good, how do I relate what I learned to another person, the elevator pitch of the past 3 years of my life, so why did you spend all this money and spend all this time, doing X or Y or Z? Always good to have a good explanation for that.
Absolutely. And now you'll have a 30-minute podcast episode to keep.
I'll just say, hey, look, go subscribe to Mic'd Up. You don't need to talk to me.
That's it. That's funny.
I already did this once.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here today on UMBC's Mic'd Up podcast. It's really been an insightful conversation, and I think helpful to listeners who are wondering what engineering management is all about and who are fascinated by the world of engineering, as you are. So thank you so much for sharing your ideas and insights and experiences with being in the graduate program.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was a good talk, like you said.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of UMBC's Mic'd Up. We hope that you enjoyed it. If you'd like to learn more about UMBC's graduate programs in engineering management, please visit us at engm.umbc.edu.